The Feast of the Epiphany is a story about outsiders recognizing truth while insiders cling to fear and power. In this episode, we explore how Christianity built an us versus them worldview and how the Epiphany narrative quietly disrupts that whole system. When we follow the light of curiosity and inclusion instead of fear, we reclaim the very values these ancient stories were meant to teach. Welcome to another bonus edition of the MTB Podcast, a segment of the weekly episode that I call Afterthoughts. This is my favorite part of these weekly presentations because it gives me a chance to dig a little deeper into something that came up during the main episode. So let's talk about something we don't usually associate with Christmas or the Epiphany. The idea that Christianity, yes, the religion built around love your neighbor, Christianity became one of the most powerful engines in human history for dividing the world into us and them. And here's the strange part. The readings for the Epiphany actually undermine that whole mindset. They break the pattern. They're supposed to be about light shining on everyone, truth revealed to outsiders, and a world where belonging isn't limited to one tribe. Yet, look at Christianity today, especially the loud political forms of it, and you'll see exactly the opposite. They're all about gatekeeping. They're all about drawing lines, policing identities, deciding who's in, who's out, who's worthy, and who God allegedly hates this week. The irony is, the very stories they quote to justify exclusions are often the same ones that say the outsiders get it first. So, let's dive into that in this episode of Afterthoughts. All right, let's start with something basic. Humans have always divided the world into groups. It's how our brains evolved. We scan the environment and quickly decide friend or foe, safe or dangerous, someone like me or someone different from me. Ancient Judaism did this too, of course. They were a tribal people, surrounded by much larger, more powerful empires, which makes the instinct to preserve a strong group identity extremely understandable. The laws, customs, purity codes, those were survival mechanisms. Judaism became a tight, cohesive community, partly because it had to. Then along comes Christianity, which starts as an offshoot Jewish sect with an unusually inclusive message. All nations shall come to your light, Isaiah says. The Magi, outsiders, foreigners, Gentiles, they see something worth pursuing. The letter to the Ephesians talks about breaking down walls. The earliest Jesus movement wasn't an exclusive club. It was more like a philosophical community where anyone could walk in. But over time, something shifted. Christianity moved from marginal to mainstream, from persecuted minority to empire-backed institution. And when powerful people get hold of something, they rarely keep its original spirit. They reshape it into a tool. And nothing is more useful to people in power than creating an other to rally against. It becomes, we have the truth, they don't. We are chosen, they aren't. We are saved, they're damned. And just like that, the inclusive message somehow becomes a weapon. Now, compare that mindset to the actual Epiphany story. 3 foreigners walk right into Jerusalem looking for the King of the Jews. And who feels threatened? Herod, the insider. the political leader, the one with the titles and the palaces and the wealth and the soldiers. The Magi recognize value in a humble child. Herod sees a threat to his power. Now, that's a pattern we still see today. People who are secure in themselves, well, they don't fear differences. People who are insecure cling to control. Christian nationalists today aren't terrified because they're strong. They're terrified because they're weak, at least internally. They cling to power because they're afraid of what happens when people start thinking for themselves. They claim to protect Christian values while they're behaving nothing like the Magi and everything like Herod. The Epiphany story is a giant billboard reminding us that outsiders are not the threat. They're often the ones who see the truth more clearly than the insiders who've grown complacent or corrupt. But Christianity, as it became an empire, flipped the script. Instead of embracing outsiders, it began defining itself against them. Pagans, Jews, Muslims, atheists, heretics, scientists, witches, anyone who challenged the system became the other. Herod's fear has become the church's playbook. Once Christianity became the official religion of Rome, it needed a way to unify a massive, diverse empire. And you know what unifies people better than shared values? A shared enemy. So the church built an entire worldview around policing beliefs. Orthodoxy versus heresy. Saved versus damned. Clean versus unclean. And later, civilized versus barbarian. Christian versus Jew. Christian versus Muslim. On it goes. Some of the greatest atrocities in Western history, like crusades, inquisitions, colonization, forced conversions, they flowed directly from this habit of dividing humanity into us and them. None of that lines up with what the Magi represent. None of it reflects the vision in Isaiah of nations drawn together by shared light. None of it resembles Paul's idea of tearing down walls between people. But exclusion was politically useful, so exclusion won. And Christian nationalists today, they're not reviving ancient Christianity. They're reviving ancient imperial Christianity, the version of Christianity that was obsessed with dominance, purity, and rule enforcement, not with wisdom, inclusion, certainly not with truth. Here's the beautiful irony. The Feast of the Epiphany is the one day when the church can't hide from its own contradictions. Because Epiphany is all about outsiders recognizing value that insiders overlooked. It's about light shining on everyone, not just the chosen few. It's about truth arriving in unexpected places. Epiphany is about welcoming differences, not fearing them. It's about curiosity being greater than dogma. And it's about wisdom coming from people who don't follow your religion. If Christians actually lived the lessons from the Epiphany, Christian nationalism wouldn't even exist. It couldn't. That entire worldview would collapse in upon itself. Christian nationalism says only our group knows the truth. The Epiphany says truth doesn't belong to one group. Christian nationalism says outsiders are dangerous. The Epiphany says wisdom can come from outsiders. Christian nationalism says power must be protected. While the Epiphany says light is shared. These mindsets can't coexist. And yet here we are. So what do we do with all of this? Well, we don't have to prove Christianity wrong. That's exhausting and kind of pointless. But we can point back to the values embedded in the stories, values that are bigger than religion. Inclusivity, curiosity, pursuing the truth, welcoming the outsider, standing up to fearful leaders. We can challenge people when their actions contradict their own claimed values. If someone talks about the Magi while behaving like Herod, call it out, gently but clearly. We can reclaim the universal message behind the myth. We don't need a star or a miracle to follow the light. We need honesty, empathy, and courage. We can resist the very human, very ancient habit of treating difference as a threat. Because every time humanity has expanded its circle of belonging, we've grown stronger. This is what makes the Epiphany surprisingly powerful in a secular, humanistic way. The stories, might not be literal history, most certainly aren't, but they capture a truth we still desperately need. The outsider is not the enemy. In fact, the outsider is often the one who reveals the path forward. If you take nothing else away from this week's episode of Afterthoughts, please take this. We don't have to repeat the mistakes of the past. We don't have to inherit the fear-based worldview that turned neighbor into the other. We can choose curiosity instead of religious certainty. We can choose inclusion instead of exclusion, courage instead of control. We can choose to be the ones who walk toward the light, wherever it's coming from, even if it leads us someplace unfamiliar, or humbling, or wildly different than we expected. That's the real spirit of the Epiphany. And honestly, that's how we build a healthier, more compassionate future. We don't need divine revelation. We just need the courage to see each other clearly. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Afterthoughts. If you want to keep up on everything I'm doing, please head over to thecodaproject.com and subscribe to my newsletter. You'll get notifications whenever I publish anything, and I'll also keep you updated on the weekly live streams of mythologizing the Bible. If you subscribe for free over at The Coda Project, you'll start receiving my publication called The Weekly Compass. This is a brief guide on a single core value. Think of it as a mini lesson plan for personal growth. It's perfect for families, students, and adults because I include discussion questions designed for each age group. As a subscriber, you'll also have access to the Guide to Kitchen Table Activism, which is a detailed resource designed to help you be politically active from your own home. The guide explains why activism is important, the philosophy behind kitchen table activism, and the foundational values it supports, before laying out how to use the tools you have to make your voice heard. It provides tools, tactics, and templates for you to use, and it only takes about 15 minutes a week. If you care about our democracy, our country, and our world, then I encourage you to check it out. While you're at it, make sure you hit the subscribe button so that you'll start receiving my newsletter called The Kitchen Table Activist. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, remember to question everything, keep what's good, and live what matters.